So today we're talking to Alan Ward. Alan's the Managing Director of Change Drivers, a consultancy specializing in transformational change and change management. Alan's experience is pretty much unparalleled when it comes to helping organizations adopt better systems and procedures for getting work done. He's also working on a new venture now, a marketing services business to help boutique winemakers. Alan, we're really excited to talk to you today. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
No problems. Good to chat, Paul.
So I was once told that all change management projects feel like failure when you're in the middle of them and you've got to see them through to the end to get the benefit. Do you agree with that one?
Yeah, it's one of the fundamentals of change. I think it was Roosevelt Moscanta who used it most famously, probably 20 years ago.
Right.
He said all change looks like failure in the middle, and you know the point of Wilbur and Orville Wright, of Orville saying to Wilbur, well, you're never going to get me up in one of those things. It's one of those pieces that you have to work through and recognize that the dark angels of doubt perch on your shoulder at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Yep.
whispering in your ear that you chose the wrong strategy. It's one of those pieces.
I think that's probably something that most people can identify with in one venture or work role they've had at one time or another.
Oh, without a doubt, I think anybody who's had even a relatively junior position these days is faced with the need to manage change in organisations. You know, that old line of if you're standing still, you're going to get run over by the train is absolutely true.
Yep.
Nothing lasts forever, and short term these days seems to be counted in weeks and months. Long term is no longer decades.
I think that's very true. So Alan, a lot of our audience are tech startups and small businesses, and in growing companies, hiring people is a major decision, particularly for smaller businesses. And as we know, each new person can make quite a significant difference, and hiring the wrong person can be a really costly mistake. So what non-job specific things do you look for when you're hiring top talent?
One of the questions that I pose when you're talking to people in a recruiting environment is, tell me about one of your failures and tell me about what you did to recover from the failure.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about what caused it and tell me about how you responded to it. What did you do?
Yeah.
We learn far more in life from our failures than we do our successes.
I agree, and I think it's the way people respond to the challenges they have. I mean, everyone seems to be pretty relaxed and happy when things are going well, but it's much more of a test when things are not.
Yeah, it's the resilience required to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again. That separates, I think, winners from losers.
Yeah.
Those great stories about Colonel Sanders and taking his Kentucky Fried Chicken to 650 outlets before somebody said, "Yeah, this looks like a good idea. Let's make some."
Yep.
I mean, those stories are urban myths and develop into urban myths, but they're still true.
Yep.
Anybody who gets success first time up has either they've been dead lucky. They've been dead lucky. So that piece about overnight success takes 10 years.
Yeah, well, I once read an article that analyzed the similarities between a whole host of billionaires, and in fact, in this article, they identified that the only thing that they all had in common was the fact that they'd experienced significant failure in their time. So I thought that was a pretty telling thing.
Yeah, I think Ray Kroc, founder of McDonald's, I think he went broke 3 times before he bought out the McDonald's brothers hamburger business.
Yeah.
So it's the resilience that says, this will pass. Get on with life. Get over it. There's an intestinal fortitude for people who succeed, and you keep on, and I'll say that you keep on reaching deeply into it.
Yes. So, Alan, a little bit extending from that a little bit, how can leaders build a culture that overcomes a fear of failure and kind of encourages experimentation, learning, and growth?
Well, by doing what you just said, encourage people to experiment, encourage people to keep on stretching their boundaries, to keep on taking risks that don't bet the farm, but not to be satisfied with what you're doing. I think that complacency is the biggest enemy of a successful organization.
Right.
Good, the enemy of best.
Yeah, it's very true.
There are these sort of apocryphal statements that I'll say blokes of my age have lived through and recognise that there is this germ of truth in these sort of wise old sayings, and if you're prepared to accept them and not be trite about it, but recognise that you can always do it better. And but also there's a piece that I go on about endlessly, which is the 80-20 rule. Sort of identify the 20% of things that are going on inside your organisation that are causing you pain, and fix them.
Yeah.
And if you can fix them to the 80% rule, where they're no longer in the top 20%, move on to the next ones that are causing you pain. But don't polish the apple.
Yeah.
We can have a tendency to lose ourselves in the detail because it's comfortable and it looks as though we're doing work.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a plan of what it is that you're trying to do, you will tend to do that. You will tend to start messing about in the places where you feel comfortable and confident.
So what do you think the trick is for aspiring entrepreneurs and business leaders out there that want to make sure that their teams and other people are applying these kind of principles, that they don't get complacent? Is there anything they can do to encourage the right behaviour?
It's a great question, Paul, and because of what I'm doing at the moment of setting up this new business, I spend an awful lot of time doing very detailed planning,
Yep.
and working with half a dozen other colleagues who are investors in the business, while we really did test the business plan to the nth degree.
Right.
And we used. I don't know if you're familiar with Strategizer. Strategizer is a particularly useful formula process for analysing your business. But we kept on testing the business model and looking for failure in the business model.
Yeah.
Once we'd done the work on paper, I then spent 2 weeks in the Barossa Valley visiting likely clients and talking to them about the business model and gauging whether or not they would be clients once we got the business going. And based upon that feedback, I went back to Sydney and I convinced half a dozen blokes to throw a bunch of money into the pot for us to build the business. And the thing that I've been doing, we came down here at the end of February. We're now 7 months into the business. I have been absolutely focused on delivering the fundamentals of the business. I've not allowed myself to be distracted from the plan, because as soon as they say every plan lasts until the first contact with the enemy. So our plan has been a very solid business plan with some very solid milestones that we needed to achieve.
Yep.
I have focused against the plan. All of that is a long way of saying, if you want to be successful, for Christ's sake, have a plan to start with.
Right.
Don't go on a random walk, because on a random walk, you'll see some bright glittering object over on the other side of the road. You say, well, I'll go over there and I'll have a go with that.
Yep.
Haven't got a plan, and if you haven't got a plan and you're not working against the plan, you will inevitably be distracted by the other opportunities that will arise because you're now available to them. You know, your reticular activated vision kicks in, and you start to see things that are associated that will take your mind off the main game. And if you don't have a main game, you don't know whether or not that distraction is going to be worth pursuing.
Right.
So if you don't have the benchmark against which to test your idea, there's a danger that you will go off on the random walk. And I've been very disciplined about delivering the central idea. But on the way, I've got to tell you, I've picked up dozens and dozens of bright, glittering distractions that will end up being market extension strategies.
Got it.
But I've been actually focused on deliver the basics first.
So it sounds like, you really need to have a vision and a plan sort of outlined in front of you, and that actually gives you the framework within which you can then experiment, because, otherwise it can become wildly distracting. But if you've got a clear idea of where you're going, then small deviations along the way actually can be a really positive thing.
Yeah, and again, even for a small startup organisation, if it's more than you, then you do need to have a vision, and the vision doesn't have to be one of these grand corporate statements. The vision is the thing that you can share with anybody that joins you in your venture.
Right.
In this current business, we're only 5 strong at the moment.
Yeah.
But everybody in the organisation has a very, very clear understanding of what it is that we want to achieve in the organisation, understands their role and understands how they contribute to that achievement. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the business is able, even at this stage, to reflect at the end of the week whether or not they contributed in taking us another step closer to our objective. And they all understand what the journey is. They all understand what it is we have to achieve. So, I think if you don't have that information for people just turn up.
Yeah.
And
status quo.
Yeah, and I say, I don't pay you for turning up.
Yeah.
I pay you for doing the stuff that you need to do
to
get here. Yeah.
So, for a lot of first-time CEOs out there, particularly in the startup economy, there's many of these kind of younger guys that are running a business for the first time. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've seen is that running a good management meeting is actually pretty hard to get right. There's often ends up being too many people. Often the agenda isn't clear. Action points aren't captured. What tips and tricks do you have for running a solid management meeting?
All of that old-fashioned stuff about have an agenda, ensure that you've distributed information ahead of the meeting, demand that people be aware of information that has been distributed. Don't turn up with your board papers or your management meeting papers and read them for the first time at the table. That's one thing that's guaranteed to get my back up.
Yep.
And turn up and contribute. The only reason for having a meeting is to exchange. And that's another important part about it. Understand what's the purpose of the meeting. Is the meeting an information exchange meeting? Is the meeting an environment where you want to build ideas? Mm-hmm. They are quite different meetings and need to be managed and facilitated accordingly. Too often, I think people turn up for meetings actually not knowing what's the purpose of the meeting and not knowing how they should how they're expected to contribute to the meeting.
Yeah.
So that if you're having a meeting just to get people together, go down the pub and have a drink.
Yeah.
But if you're having a meeting that is about reporting on progress against organisational goals, have a real clarity about what the meeting is about, have a real clarity about the agenda, and have a real clarity about is this is this a meeting that is going to result in action for people after the meeting?
Yeah.
And what do you want them to do? And how do you want them to come back to you and report on progress against the meeting? I'm um, I'm a bit of a systems Nazi around these things. I have yet to find a really good system that allows you to exchange information, provide instruction, guidance, orders to ensure that the work that you want to have done in the organization is getting done.
Right.
And the tips and tricks about it are to really understand how you develop an action plan and how you report back on an action plan.
Yep.
If you don't, if you are a startup organization, typically you've got a dozen projects on the go at any one stage,
Exactly.
most of which are integrated in some way or another, few of which are delivered by an individual,
Yep.
and most of which require people across the organisation to share and contribute. And if you're a business that's growing, typically the guys that are responsible for making it grow are busy enough in their own right, and unless you've got a really clear idea of how you contribute to one another's end games, you're not going to contribute because you're too busy making your own part of the ship work. I'm the marketing manager. I'm too bloody busy making marketing work to worry about what the accountant wants me to do for reporting on expenses. So unless you all understand how that lot comes together, you'll have anger and irritation at your table, which is unnecessary if you've got a good plan of action.
Alan, I'm just going to change tack a little here. I want to ask you about how you personally get things done. I mean, there's a lot of different productivity techniques out there. There's, David Allen's getting things done. There's Pomodoro. There's Kanban. There's no end of them. What I know the research constantly says is there's no one size fits all. There's no silver bullet when it comes to productivity. So I just wanted to ask you, do you use any particular methodology?
I've been, as you know, I've been doing organizational change management for years. So when I talk about using methodologies, the current ADKAR process that is part of ProSize toolbox gives a good framework for how to make change happen in organizations.
Right.
You need to have a shared tool, and I almost don't care if your shared tool is an Outlook to-do list. So long as everybody has access to the tool and is able to share information and keep one another apprised of where a job is, then you're okay. But it's got to be shared. It can't be one person who's the keeper of all information. And I can also tell you that I have tried dozens and dozens and dozens of different tools over the years.
What have you found?
And I found that none of them really answer the question. I can also, without wanting to sort of give too much of an advertorial, I know that ScribblePost has the bones of the ability to share information amongst those who need to get a job done. And the failures that I've found in most tools is they're not intuitive enough. They require an administrative overburden that I don't want to apply.
Yeah.
Alon Novi's got a great line about Microsoft Project. There are only two types of people in the world: those who hate Microsoft Project and those who've never used Microsoft Project.
That's it.
And,
Yeah.
and I agree with him entirely.
Yeah.
But it's it's the ubiquitous tool that people reach to.
Yes.
Because it answers a question that allows you to pretend that you've actually got a project under control. So, and I've used tools like Primavera, and the thing that always ends up getting me down about them is you end up with system Nazis who think that your job is to spend 2 hours a day keeping the project plan up to date.
Yep.
And it doesn't help. I don't get the reason that they don't get used is I don't get the return out of the effort.
Yes.
So my process is I've got a dreadful memory. I write stuff down. I keep a diary. I use my calendar.
Yeah.
I keep on searching for the next tool that will allow me to do it better.
Right.
And I'm not going to advertise any of them because none of them do the job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely agree with what you're saying, and I know that ScribblePost is kind of founded on some of the challenges that you're describing. So, I think there's certainly common challenges. But if we look at your typical day, do you have any particular routines in terms of,
Yeah.
when you check your calendar or when you book meetings? I mean, are there any tips you've got for staying focused?
I use my calendar. I use my Outlook calendar, and at the moment I'll advertise the tool. I'm using Salesforce.com as a central tool in our CRM. So we're a marketing services business, so the CRM is critical to us.
Yeah.
But the linkage into my Outlook calendar is absolutely critical. So my reference is at the end of every day, I refer to all of those things that I said I was going to do today, all of the phone calls I was going to make,
Yep.
all the emails I was going to write, and I ensure that I've either done them, or if I haven't done them, I move them onto the next day, or to whenever it is that I'm going to complete them. And first thing in the morning, I check my calendar to see what are my to-dos today. And I've been a constant user of electronic calendars since we first had electronic calendars available to us. So the use of, because my business has always been around communications and meetings and exchange of information,
Yeah.
and that obviously all takes place between people. So I've always, for the last 20 years, I've used the CRM as a way of me having a relationship management tool. So that has been central to my day.
Okay, great. And tell me, one of the challenges that is also very common is this problem of information overload, whether it's having too many emails, a long list of articles and newsletters that are forever being sent to us. We've got notes that we take in meetings. You can even consider, text messages and chat messages, and it just goes on and on. So,
Yes.
I mean, the question is, how do you deal with information overflow? But perhaps by extension, it's, how do you make the decisions about what to focus on?
I think, Paul, I think that there's a piece there about, there's also the piece about, and what's important to me, what's important to my team, what's the timeliness nature of this information? Do I need it right now? Or do I want to be able to look at it do I need to look at it in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, or come back to it in a month's time?
Yeah.
Managing information in that way require simply requires discipline. I mean, again, yeah, back in the days of, I'm going to say pre-computer, but not really. The call forward register of having an expander file that was 31 days and another expander file that was 12 months.
Yeah.
And taking a document and dropping it in, yeah, I'm not going to look at this until next February, and dropping it into that file to come back to.
Yeah.
It's that was the way we managed in a paper environment.
Yes.
And being old enough to remember when we had things like personal assistants and secretaries who managed that stuff for you and put the information in front of you
Yes.
to be dealt with. Now, if an electronic system did that, I would be one very happy chap.
Okay.
And I found an electronic system that does that, of presenting it to me as regularly and as simply as that, without having the huge administrative overburden.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. All right. Good. Go on. Was there something more?
Uh, well, you asked about the increasing information that comes to us. I reckon you just got to be really disciplined of saying that's stuff that has got it's of no interest, it's of no value to me, and be disciplined enough to recognise what it is you wipe. I probably process 150 emails a day.
Yeah.
And I reckon there's 5 of them that are of any value to me.
Absolutely right.
Email has simply become white noise, in my opinion.
Right. And so for you, a big part of it is actually filtering out all the crap that's not the stuff that's important for you to get done.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm an avid reader.
Right. Okay.
So staying apprised of stuff that's important to me has become really important to me.
And tell me, in your mind, are there categories of things that you know are always important to you, or do you make the decision kind of as things come into your focus? You make it on the fly?
There are a bit of both. I mean, there's some stuff that is I will always take the time to at least skim through information, and there are hard copy journals that come to me that I do that with. Harvard Business Review, for example, I've been taking Harvard Business Review for 40 years.
Right.
And I flick it. And it typically takes me 10 minutes to read the Harvard Review. Then there'll be an article every third journal that I'll want to read in some depth.
Right, okay.
The same thing, Soundview Executive Summaries. I've been Soundview Executive Summaries, abstract management textbooks, down to an 8-page summary, and they do 3 textbooks a month, and I've been taking them for 30 years. And they used to come through in hard copy. They're now soft copy, but I still take the time to so they've abstracted a 400 page academic text to 8 pages, and I unfortunately skim the 8 pages. So I might go back and read.
It sounds to me like, you actually have a pretty clear idea of the stuff you like to read or the stuff that you find is important to you. I reckon a lot of the problem that people have is they don't have a clear set of things that they are looking for. So they get overwhelmed when such a high volume comes in front of them. They've got to make a new decision on every article that comes across their desk.
Yeah.
And that can be quite overwhelming.
And I think that possibly comes down to the fact that I know that I'm a student of management and have been since the 80s. So that allows me to be fairly Catholic about what it is that I will give time to.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I'm also naturally inquisitive, so I like to try to keep abreast of stuff that's outside of my domain. I think you become boring as a a specialist if the only thing that you do is read specialist matter.
Yes.
So there's a piece of, I think this is perhaps a developed discipline in life of knowing what's important to you that you will devote some time to,
Yeah.
then getting really good at doing that so that you have enough time to just sort of graze on stuff that takes your interest. And I can remember when I became self-employed. I'm not a good details person. Oh, that's not true, actually. I'm a very good details person, but I don't like detail.
Right.
But I discovered as a self-employed individual that if I didn't do my expenses and my timesheets and raise invoices, I didn't get paid.
Yeah.
So I decided that what I was going to do was get really, really, really good at doing that stuff and having the systems,
Yeah.
so that I didn't have to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
So,
That's an
so,
excellent insight. Really strong insight there.
so that if it's important to you, get good at it.
Yeah.
And if it's important to you and you don't like it, get excellent at it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, in kind of the startups and the growing businesses, as you said before, there's often, you've got a million things to do. There's a lot of different projects running at once. And what I've seen is that short-term tasks like, writing proposals and presenting to investors, it often takes a priority and creates a risk that longer-term goals fall by the wayside. It might be
Yeah.
releasing a product or entering a new market or other strategic initiatives. So do you have any thoughts or tips for how to balance these urgent short-term tasks with long-term business goals?
Yeah. And I'll give a war story. When we started up Change Drivers, our focus was to build a presence in federal government. And the way you build a presence in federal government I think it's still the way, but back then the way that you did it was you responded to lots of tenders and you got on panels. And they were always rush jobs. But what we decided to do was to really understand the system of response, so that we could draw on boilerplate.
Yeah.
Drawing on boilerplate information that everybody had access to build responses. So, for example, abstracts about projects that you've delivered need to be written once and written well.
Yeah.
CVs need to be written once and written well.
Right.
Explanation of your organisation, the slide decks that you use to present your information. Write them once, write them well, and make sure that when they then get used, that it's a minor job to make corrections, so that you can actually release time to do the intelligent and intellectual stuff that wins you the job, that adds value, that proves that you're different in the in the marketplace. Because you've got to find, as you said, Paul, there's always things to do.
Yeah.
You've got to find how you get rid of the administrative trivia of your business,
Yeah.
so that you can concentrate on the real value add of your business, and make sure that we're all only here for 365 days a year, and even when you're building a business for a new business, you can't devote 24/7, because if you do, you'll burn out. So you've got to find ways of making sure that the crap in the business doesn't overwhelm you.
Yes.
To give yourself room to do, as I say, that bit about walk down the path and graze a little and look elsewhere, and give yourself a respite from what inevitably is a grind. It's building businesses is hard work, and if you're a startup, it's doubly hard work.
Yeah.
So that piece of Um, simplify your work to the point that it can be simplified and no further.
Yeah, I think there's a great Einstein quote in there somewhere.
Yeah, there is. That was it. Yeah. But it's get that under control so that you don't end up throwing to, say, in the case of putting in a bid or putting in a proposal. You don't want to look like an amateur when you're putting in a proposal. So make sure that the fundamental stuff,
Yeah,
and most proposals, 80% of the stuff that goes into a proposal is boilerplate.
yeah. So
20% is the important stuff. In fact, if there was one rule that I would give everybody who's putting a business together, it is understand the 80-20 rule and work it really, really hard.
yes, absolutely. So I mean, if I were to paraphrase this, it sounds like the advice could be for small businesses and growing businesses, invest early in building the right processes and assets so
Yeah,
that you don't have a snowball effect occur for a bunch of repetitive stuff that may be important, but it's repetitive.
yeah,
Make sure that you become highly efficient at doing those so that you can maintain focus on the longer term strategic things.
yes, yeah.
Right. That's very
There
good.
was a great quote from, and I'm now having a seniors moment. The founder of IBM, International Business Management Systems.
Yeah.
The quote went along the lines of, once I decided I was going to become a big company, I determined what it was that a big company did and how a big company acted. And from that moment, that was the way I acted.
Right.
And it's,
Yeah.
forgive me for not having it sort of it's paraphrased, not verbatim, but it was such an important statement. Well, that's how we needed to think about ourselves when we started up Change Drivers, and that was how we thought about ourselves.
Yeah.
We thought about ourselves as a large and significant consulting practice, and we built our systems around that.
Now, when you've got a lot of projects on the go and you don't have the resources to have dedicated, experienced project managers, there's often kind of little formality and little structure to these. So if we just go kind of back to the basics for the untrained project manager for a minute, in your experience, what do you think the key elements are to a successfully run project?
Good question. The project plan is critical, and you've got to understand what it is you're delivering. So the Stephen Covey piece of start with the end in mind.
Yep.
You've really got to understand what is the deliverable, and be able to describe the deliverable, and you've got to be able to describe the state of the project at whatever the critical milestones are inside the project plan. But I think that project managers make the mistake of believing that they can describe in infinitesimal detail what's going to be going on in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, 12 months' time.
Right.
I figure that the way you've got to, this is the way I've driven projects in organisational change for the last 20 years. I describe the overall project, and I understand when the drop dead date is, when it's got to be delivered to the client, and I have very high level activity statements that describe what it is that we're going to be doing in big blocks of time.
Yeah.
But the detail of the work is, and you've got to take into consideration. I'm talking here about, say, a 12-month change program. What we're going to be doing in November and December, I've got no bloody idea.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, if I'm in February, I know the work that's got to be done in February and what's got to be delivered, and I've got a really clear idea of the work that's got to happen in March, and I've got clear statements of who's going to do what, and how long you're going to be given to do it. So the statements are around the delivery of an outcome. I think in outcome terms, not in input terms.
Yes, that
So
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, describe what it is you want somebody to have achieved in very, very clear language, and make sure that you can measure it. Even if it's subjective measurement, it needs to be. You need to be able to describe in terms of result what it is you want somebody to do. And once you've done that, tell them how long you think it should take them,
Yeah,
and then ask them for their input.
that makes a lot of sense.
And so long as there is a match between what it is you're saying you want somebody to do and how long they think it's going to take, I think you're on a winner.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and my other advice around that stuff is, and when you're giving out an instruction to somebody to do something,
yes,
my line is, and you'll know if you're halfway through. And if you're halfway through and you've consumed 75% of the resources that we said you were going to consume, you better come and tell me, because I'll need to go and negotiate with the client.
yes.
Do not turn up at the 95% resources consumed, 70% of the way through delivery, and tell me we're going to run out of resource.
So, in terms of governing that kind of communication, I mean, I think we can probably agree that communication is usually where it falls apart in any kind of project. But like, to what end do you think formal process and even documentation is important? Because I get varying responses here. Some people say, look, documenting is critical, but keep it short. Other people say documentation isn't the critical piece. And of course, formal project management, there's actually usually quite a heavy load of documentation.
Well, I mean, I've worked in Prince 2 environments, which are just scary.
Yeah.
But then again, that has been inside defense environments where, yeah, it's scary, but it's also necessary.
And when you say scary, you mean because of the volume of documentation?
Just the volume of documents and the amount of effort that is required to keep them current, and the difficulty of people actually absorbing the information that is contained in the documentation. There's one part about documenting something, the interpretation of what the documents mean becomes something else.
Yeah. So what I want to know in what you've said is, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's really interesting. If you take out the governance requirement that comes with being a defense department or a government department, do you think that documentation has practical value?
Yes, it has a practical value in as much that it will provide the platform for the conversation or conversations that need to take place for you to ensure that everybody has the same understanding and appreciation. I think the benefit of the document, the benefit of the tasking statement is you can sit and write the tasking statement and give it to somebody and then have a conversation with them around the statement to ensure that you do have a meeting of minds. There's that line of, I think 10 times faster than I can speak, and I speak 10 times faster than I can write.
Yeah.
But I can't be confident that what I've written you actually understand from my thinking.
Yeah.
Because my writing is obviously a distillation of my thinking.
Yes.
And it's going to be a distillation of my speaking.
Yes.
So it's only by me going through sort of in splendid isolation, writing a tasking statement that I have given thought to, and then give it to you for us to have a conversation about, because as we have the conversation, you will be thinking about what I'm saying and what you are saying. And through that, the greatest of disagreement becomes the greatest understanding.
Yeah.
So it
I certainly
so
agree. But I think that can probably be achieved with a fairly light amount of documentation.
oh yes, yeah, certainly. I mean, I used to use a very good tool called Omniscope for project planning,
Yeah.
which allowed me to plan out a complete project for 12 months and resource it. And on a monthly basis, as we moved through the project, I would augment the information of the project. So I would add detail regarding the activity of the project. So
Yeah.
a project plan for me would start out as maybe 12 functional blocks that were going to be delivered over a long period. But as we moved into the project, I would write in succinct detail what it is I wanted individuals to do
Yeah.
and be able to come up with a task list for them. So I'd be able to give you your task list for the whole project, and I'd be able to give you a detailed task list for next week,
Hmm.
and I'd be able to describe in some fluffy statements what it was I wanted you to do next month. And we could keep on building the detail and complexity of the documentation. I didn't need to write all the detail up front. So it was so emergent project management is evolutionary project management,
Cool.
because so often, in particularly in change management environments, you can't write the project plan because you don't know what it is you're going to have to address because you haven't uncovered the skeleton in the closet yet.
Yes, I think that's often true in startups as well, because it's such an uncertain market and unpredictable kind of high risk
Yes,
business. It's very simple.
if you will accept that your project plan is about managing uncertainty and risk,
Yes.
then you can write a project plan that addresses the risks that you can foresee now.
Yes.
Um, and if you're in a particularly risky environment, then spend a lot of time understanding what the risk might be, and then do risk analysis. So there are schemas there that and make sure you're not trying to write the highly unlikely, but if it happened, it's
Mm.
going to be catastrophic in 12 months' time.
Yeah.
Don't try to write the safe instruction around that.
Mm.
Just recognise that it's there and see whether or not it's floating up and becoming likely rather than highly unlikely.
Yeah.
So it is about communication, and the tools that we use at the moment and the tools that are available are inadequate to the task.
Right.
That's my view. You can't just rely on the tools.
Got it.
The tools have got to support the conversation.
So, at ScribblePost, we're obviously pretty kind of focused on helping other people improve their productivity. And I think it's fair to say there's probably not a company on earth that doesn't want to be more productive in one way or another. So, can you think of the top thing you would say to companies to help them lift their productivity?
Hmm. Uh, another of the aphorisms. All things are possible to men of goodwill, and here's another one. And if you would want a man to be on your side, you must first of all convince him you're truly his friend. So that is about open communication.
So that sounds like a statement about culture as well to me,
Yes,
work with the
yeah.
right people, set up the right culture.
And Paul, go back to the question you asked about how do you encourage sort of commercial risk taking and innovation.
Yeah.
You do it by breeding a culture that encourages that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you do it by conversation. You do it by not beating people up when there's a failure. I've worked in organisations where the word fail was removed from the organization, and we used to simply talk about the outcome.
Wow.
The outcome may not have been what we expected.
Yeah.
It wasn't a fail.
Yes.
In traditional organizations, it would have been considered to be a fail, but it was just the result. It was the result that we achieved, and the question that we would pose was, and how do we improve that result?
Yeah, we're certainly focused on learning, from whatever the experience is, whether it's
Yeah,
the expected outcome or not. As long as we've learned, then it can still be a positive outcome.
yeah. As I said to you earlier, our greatest learnings come from our failures.
Yeah,
Our greatest learnings don't come from success,
yeah,
because we all think we're invincible when we've had success.
yeah. It's amazing.
We
Um,
feel we learn so much more if we will be honest about not we, if the organization and the culture allows you to be honest,
yes.
allows you to exchange, um, and that's a difficult thing to set up, um, because we protect our turfs. We feel
Of
embarrassed.
course. Yeah,
There's a whole pile of complex interaction that's going on
yeah.
inside any organisation, and but communication and not allowing people to hide behind stuff and having the ability to speak.
It's actually quite funny. You've given me almost a mini sort of epiphany there. Like, I think that in many ways, a strong and positive culture helps us navigate and deal with the emotions that people inevitably have. Because if you were to just run a business based on pure emotion, it's going to be all over the place. But if you've got
Yeah.
it's like having a good culture or a strong culture is the framework you need to deal with people's fluctuating and changing emotions.
Yes. Yeah. And you can give people skills around that.
Mm.
You can help them develop the skills. So you want to help people to develop learning skills, or you want a learning organisation. Teach people how to work in a learning organisation.
Yeah.
There was a great line this is years ago, in a Tom Peters presentation, talking about Disneyland. And if anybody's ever been to Disneyland,
Yeah.
they will know that you go into Disneyland and Disneyland is spotless.
Yeah.
Um, and the line Tom Peters asked the general manager or vice president HR of Disneyland, "How do you do it?" And his response was simple. He said, "If you want clean, train clean."
Yeah.
It was really
Sounds
that
simple.
simple. Yeah, you can say the same thing about DuPont. DuPont, if you want safe, train safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
DuPont were doing safety training back in the days when Alfred DuPont lived by the side of the explosives factory that they had.
Yeah.
He said, "Yeah, I'm interested in safety because I don't want you buggers blowing us up." So
Alan, you've
that
been
culture will support you.
you've been great. I'm conscious of your time, and I've just got one last question I want to ask you. So, putting aside global goodwill and things like world peace and philanthropy, what would be the most exciting news headline you could hope to read in the next 10 years, and why?
Oh, a breakthrough. Finally, a breakthrough in the relationship between the owners of production and the production units themselves. So if bosses and workers
Yeah,
actually get their heads around, we're all in this ship together,
yeah,
um, and we all have our part to play, and we should all be rewarded according to our contribution.
I think the world would be a different place.
Oh, it will be an enormously different place. Um, I think, and work is so important to us. You know, the work ethic is still strong in our Western culture,
Yeah,
and I do believe that 99% of us go to work with the objective of doing a good job, being paid appropriately, wanting to contribute to the community, to society, wanting to feel as though at the end of the day I earned my keep. And it seems to me that organisations almost do everything in their power to make that difficult for people.
Yeah.
So if there was the communication breakthrough that stopped people responding inappropriately to some communication, or reading between the lines, or looking for hidden agendas.
Yes.
And of course, we have just shot our fifth prime minister, but that's the politics of organisation work against us more often than work for us.
Alan, thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Paul, thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it.